Before I bring our speaker up this morning, I just wanted to say a couple words about things that are going on. I know if you've heard me before, the last month or so I've been talking, but the next 100 days at our federal level is going to be critical for our business going forward. Congress comes back in, I believe, September 8th or September 9th. They're back in session. The super committee is starting their deliberations already. They're meeting. And one of the agenda items will be the mortgage interest deduction and the possible continuity or discontinuity of that, which would have a real impact on our business if they change that in some way. Indication right now is that the mortgage interest deduction will remain. However, a lot of the discussion revolves around what the upper limit is going to be, if it's going to be over, stay over $1 million, if they're going to drop that to $500,000 or possibly as low as $250,000. They probably will not discontinue it completely. And the other thing, of course, is its application to second homes. So there's a lot of discussion around that. So the next 100 days will be critical to that because that will be obviously on the budget. Also scheduled to expire the end of this month is the National Flood Insurance Program. We have bills both going from the House and from the Senate trying to extend the National Flood Insurance policy. That impacts about 6 million people across the country who have no other source of insurance. And as you've seen from some of the recent floods and the floods we've had this summer even across the Midwest, it can be extremely damaging. And last year, the National Flood Insurance policy expired for a period of about 2 months. It impacted, either delayed or canceled, about 43,000 escrows across the country. So it's a very, very big program. That's scheduled to expire the end of September if they don't extend it. The second thing that's scheduled to expire the end of September is the conforming loan limits. That was raised about 3 years ago. Currently, our area is a little over 500,000. In most areas, high-price areas, Santa Barbara, some of the higher-price areas, it's 625. That would drop us back in this area to probably 417, possibly lower. So while that's not a big hit for us right now, with our median price being what it is, it was a big deal just 3-4 years ago when our median price was $525, $535 in Temecula. And it will be a big deal again as we try to power out of this recovery. So we're very hopeful. There is also a bill coming out of the Senate that is co-sponsored by a former realtor, Johnny Isaacson, Senator Johnny Isaacson from Indiana, and our own Barbara Boxer co-sponsored that bill in the Senate to try to keep the conforming loan limits where they are right now. So those are a couple things to watch. Watch your email boxes because we may be doing some calls to action on those items in the next 30 days, 60 days or so. We are also working on, and I just got this yesterday, it was just introduced in our house Wednesday afternoon. I got a copy late yesterday, ADX 141, which is the League of Cities bill that we've been working on to try to help out our newest cities in the state. Wildomar and Menifee, 2 right in our area. The other 2 are in the northern part of Riverside County, who had their vehicle license fees pilfered in the latest round of the California state budget. In the case of Wildomar, that represented about 20% of their annual budget. And so the League of Cities has introduced this bill, and as soon as we're going to try to get some letters generated and so forth, so I will let you all know, again, probably within the next couple days, to get out a call so that you can send a letter or give a call to our legislators to try to get ADX 171 or 771 passed here before our own folks break up here in the next week or two. I'm also working to get Marie Waldron up here. Some of you may know the name. Marie's been on the Escondido City Council for probably the last 14, 15 years. She is the only current declared candidate for the 77th Assembly District. As again, some of you probably know, when they did our redistricting this year, Temecula got carved out. About 80,000 people in Temecula will no longer be part of Murrieta, Wildomar, Lake Elsinore, and so forth as they always have been. They are becoming part of a new assembly district out of San Diego, North County, and Marie Waldron is running for that seat. She's been on the City Council of Escondido. She has been a good friend to realtors, and so I'm hoping as early as next Friday to do a meet and greet with her right here at this location, so I'll let you know more about that also. Also, Howard mentioned the YPN event the other night. If you weren't there, you really missed a great event. So I'd like to thank our YPN who did a joint mixer with the Temecula Chamber of Commerce Valley Young Professionals. They did an excellent job, a big turnout down at Bailey's. Adam Ruiz from Valley Young Professionals is here with us today. Thank you, Adam. And I don't see Aaron here, who's the chair of our own YPN, but I know Dane and Curtis and the whole YPN crew. If you're a part of that, hold up your hand. You guys did a terrific job bringing out a lot of young people and a lot of young at heart people. There were some folks there with a little gray in the hair. So wonderful job to those folks. Now it is my great pleasure to introduce our speaker today. Our speaker is Murrieta Police Chief Mike Baray. Chief Baray is the 5th police chief in Murrieta's 20-year history. And he's also our first homegrown police chief, which is really kind of a cool thing. The other 4 chiefs were all great folks, but they came from outside. Chief Baray was one of the first 25 officers to join our police department in 1992, shortly after Murrieta was put together as a city. So he's been here from the beginning. He was our, I want to make sure I get this right, he was our first detective, he was our first investigative bureau lieutenant, and he's been a fixture on our streets and of course in our city hall, among our city leaders, helping establish Murrieta as the safest city in Riverside County and the 2nd safest city in the country, according to the FBI. So, that's a strong selling point, by the way. Just make a little note of that. Safest city in Riverside. Recognizing the changing nature of criminal activity in our region, Chief Baray will be providing also a liaison to our real estate fraud task force. We are extremely pleased to have him join us today to give us an update on keeping our city and our members safe. Chief Baray.
Thanks, Gene. Thanks for that introduction. Gosh, pretty good. I have nothing else to say, I guess. Actually, Howard, I do have a question. Howard, does that no recruiting apply for me too? Okay, so you guys are all fair game. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me here today to speak with you, and I'm honored to be here. As Gene mentioned, I'm one of the original officers that was hired back in 92 to form the city. I'd like to see a show of hands of how many people live in Murrieta. Just curious. Wow, quite a few of you. How many were here, let's say, have been here 5 years? Raise your hand. 10 years, keep your hands raised. 15 years. Wow. 20 years. Wow, 25 years. I'm not going to say any more because then we start getting personal. You guys, that's excellent. I usually do that in groups because I like to just to get a feel for how many people have seen the changes that have gone on in our community since I've been here. And I actually moved here in '89 when it was about 5,000 folks, and my first 10 years of law enforcement was with the city of Long Beach, the Long Beach Police Department, and I was commuting then, and it was pretty cool because when you would say Murrieta, people would say, where? And I kind of liked that. I really liked the fact that there was nobody out here at the time, but I also now obviously appreciate all the development and the big city that we have because we are. Between us and Temecula, you guys know, we're a big city. We're 200,000 folks, which with that also brings some of the problems that big cities bring. And we're trying to keep a small city feel with the metropolitan town, and that's what we're attempting as a police department. But going back to when I started in Long Beach a little bit, just so you know, 10 years there, I was really fortunate to work a lot of fun details. I worked their Metro SWAT unit, their Metropolitan Division, their Career Criminal Unit, their Homicide Bureau. So I was given some really great experience when we started here, and at that time, it was really a unique experience to start a brand new police department. Not very many cities can do that and be successful. You're really gambling with that, so there's a lot of variables involved. But the forefathers of the city at that time, their feeling was, because the sheriff at that time was so spread out with the huge increase in population, they only had one deputy for an incorporated area for like 100 square miles. So it was hard to get protection at that time. And they said, "Can you keep this place from having gang members and thugs in it?" That was kind of their words. They looked at their terms was big city cops from LA County, and for us, especially living out here, I thought, what an opportunity. 25 of us did that. Most of us from LA County at the time, and we came and we've never looked back. Our focus has really been on being part of the community. Most of our officers still live in our city, which I think makes a big difference in your service delivery because you have ownership of your community and you're not going anywhere. So you really need to solve the problems that you come across because you're going to be there tomorrow if you don't. And it's building those partnerships is what we really focused on doing. And so far it's been really successful for us. The statistics that Gene talked about, the second safest in the nation was in 2008, and that's according to FBI Part 1 crime statistics. But for the past decade, we've really been fortunate that we've always been the lowest crime rate in 3 counties, and that's Riverside, San Bernardino, and San Diego. We're behind Irvine, so we're always trying to catch Irvine. And we're number 1 in the nation in 2008. So Irvine does a very good job. In fact, I just hired one of their officers as a lateral, so I'm going to now use him as a mole and figure out what they're doing. There's a strategy to that one. Actually, a real good officer we picked up, David Hernandez. A little bit of history on our department, our structure, how we're broken down to. We have about 134 employees. We're down some sworn officers from 90 to 85 right now. We've made some cuts with the economy, but we're still effective. We're just efficient. We have about half sworn to that right now. Half of that, 40-some sworn to our 85. Non-sworn to our 85 sworn. Our department is broken up into 2 divisions with 2 captains. Their names, if you just see, you might recognize them, is Captain Vrooman, he's newly appointed. He's in charge of operations, everybody in uniform, except me. He's in charge of all your uniform personnel. Sean Haddon is the other captain, and he's in charge of the other side of the house, which we call our support division. Our support division is made up of investigations, our code enforcement, dispatch, records, pretty much everything that isn't that would support your patrol functions, which our patrol is really your boots on the ground. That's what, that's our bread and butter, basically. You call 911, that's who's responding to that. So with those 2 divisions, we have 4 lieutenants. We have 1 frozen right now that we're not backfilling. And under those lieutenants, we have sergeants, and then we have corporals and officers. We have civilians in the field that take reports as police service technicians. Another big group that helps us tremendously is our volunteer group, and they're just awesome. We have some of the same volunteers from when we started our police department. We meet with them regularly. I get in there and talk with them as often as I can, and I can't say enough about them. They augment our department. Most of them are seniors. They have a better work ethic. I'm always telling my guys that than them. They're here early. They're home late. They never asked me for a raise. They're incredible though. So I talked about recruitment. I'm always recruiting for them. They're outstanding though. What else can I tell you about our police department right now? Our dispatch center is unique. That it's our own police and fire dispatch center. That really does help in this community because it's within our community. All of our dispatchers are the same as our officers. Most of them live in our city. So when you call a dispatcher in Murrieta 911, almost all now of your 911 calls will go to our dispatch center. Prior to a couple of years ago, they would go to Highway Patrol, and then you get routed to whatever agency. But now, with advances in our radio communication system, your call, with some exceptions, the majority will all come to our dispatch center, which is a big plus. Instead of going to the Highway Patrol, which could put you on hold just because of the volume of calls they get. You don't get put on hold on 911 with us just because of the numbers, and we're able to handle those. unfortunately, your bigger agencies, that'll happen sometimes. You'll call 911 and you'll be on hold. And that's obviously the one time you really need it. So with us, I see that as a big plus for us with our own dispatch center. And we know where the dispatchers know the areas because they go on ride-alongs, they're familiar with that. And I think that's what helps our service delivery. One other statistic that we do have that I'm proud of is also our solve rate of crimes. We're the highest in the county of solving crimes. And I attribute that to our investigations. We really, that's been most of my career, has been investigations from my earlier years and even in this PD. Most of my time has been spent with that. So to me, I really see the importance of that follow-up and following through. So thus we have a core group of investigators that don't rotate. They're permanent investigators. And what that means is a lot of agencies will rotate officers through those positions. Well, that's good. Maybe we have some of those also. It's good for the officers. Really well rounds them. The service delivery, you need expertise in areas. We have a guy that works real estate fraud, an investigator that's excellent at it. One of the best in the county, and we have to develop that, and you have to keep that and retain it. So they're really on step. They're corporals. They're two stripes. They're really equivalent to a base sergeant. So that's how I retain them in those positions, and they're worth their weight in gold to me and the organization. We have 9 investigators and a sergeant that handle general investigations, and they're broken up into areas of expertise. I have a sergeant and 6 officers that work a set team, which is special enforcement like drugs, an active crime series. I'll put those guys on it. They're the undercover guys that we have. Also under that is I have my school resource program and juvenile investigators, and I call them investigators because when they're not at the schools, they are helping and assisting our investigators, and that's 6 investigators with that and a sergeant. So that's a pretty good investigative unit for our size city, and they're busy. I did want to talk to you guys about a trend that I'm seeing, and I talked to Gene about this last time we met. And it's really an alarming trend. And when I get done here, I'm going to open this up for questions and answers to you guys, to you folks. But a trend I've been seeing, I've been telling Gene, is an increase in heroin with our young kids, with young teenagers, adolescents up into their 20s, and starting like right around we're seeing it about the 17-year age and moving up. And we really are associating it to the crackdown that we did just not too long ago on pharmaceutical drugs, Oxycontin, drugs like that we really brought a lot of awareness to that. But we really feel what happened when that happened is we had a lot of kids, and we use the term soccer moms because that were addicted to prescription drugs. And we have an office, one of our detectives, John Nelson, ended up being the county's expert in this field for pharmaceutical drugs. He worked closely with the DEA, with the DOJ, Department of Justice, B&E, Bureau of Narcotic Enforcement, developing some programs with that. But we actually ended up prosecuting some doctors behind this. One of them went for one doctor. We just got through with that was from this valley, was sentenced to manslaughter in one of these cases. So what that did was it really tightened that down. But when that happened, you still had, I think, these kids and young people that had addiction issues. I mean, they had to fill that. Heroin is cheap. These other drugs now, Oxycontin on the street, the prices have skyrocketed. And for us, looking at the age group of this room, when I said heroin, everyone went, oh man, everybody, I could hear the gasp when I said heroin. Because when we grew up, heroin, everybody knew you didn't touch heroin because you knew the stories behind it, you knew the addiction, you knew the consequences, you knew how devastating heroin was to people's lives. And really, for the most part, when I started my career, heroin was big and I worked it all the time. But then it tapered off. You really didn't see a lot of heroin probably in the 90s. You kind of dropped off, so I think you have an awareness issue with some of the adults now that are probably in their 30s that when you say, and especially the kids, you say heroin, they're really not, well, yeah, it's heroin. They really don't get it. They don't see the devastation this drug causes. And the way they were starting to use it, you obviously, I think everybody knows, we have a real issue with marijuana use with kids in this valley. It's unbelievable with the availability and the problem that's caused. I taught DARE for several years on my days off, and I will tell you to this day, it is a gateway drug. There is absolutely a correlation between marijuana and harder drugs. I'll argue that with anybody who wants to argue it, but because I hear that argument a lot, it is. Here's an example. The way they started using heroin in our valley was smoking it. They call it chasing the dragon, and what they do is they'll heat it up and they inhale it. Well, for them, that's not a big step if you're smoking weed a lot and you're high, and this is another form to get high, and these kids were getting started on heroin that way. Well, then you realize that once you're addicted and you need that high, that's not an efficient way to smoke heroin or to get it into your system. You're wasting a lot of it. So they started injecting it. I don't think if you would immediately tell these kids, hey, will you stick a needle in your arm? It's, oh, are you kidding me? That's crazy. It sneaks up on them. It's like, warm water, turning it up to high. So I really, I'm going to start, we're coming up with a program right now to really start hitting some groups on an educational basis with PowerPoint and actually probably bringing in some heroin. If you haven't seen, it's mainly tar heroin in this area. We call it tar heroin because it looks like tar. Smells like vinegar, if that's an easy way to spot it. But I want parents and people to be aware of this because it is absolutely out there. And it's what you'll see with heroin is you are going to see an increase in crime. And without a doubt, it starts with, you'll see it at this level, it's going to start with kids with their parents. Anything they can steal. As their addiction grows, they'll increase their thefts. Interestingly, from my experience, heroin really hasn't been, it's more, the crime I see associated or used to a lot with heroin is burglaries, residential burglaries, the robberies, the more violent crime I actually saw more with rock cocaine. And I actually just kind of associate it with the nature of the drug. One is a stimulant, one is a depressant. I don't know if that's a good correlation, but for me it was obviously there when I worked these two drugs. Not to say heroin addicts don't do robberies, which they do, but in more frequency I saw it with rock cocaine when I worked that heavily. So that's what I wanted to get out there just quickly to you guys, and hopefully I'm going to have a program out there. Gene, maybe at some other time it would be a down and dirty, quick, maybe 10-15 minute presentation on the slideshow with one of my investigators that he's going to start addressing community groups and telling them about heroin. So I'll keep this group in mind for that if you folks would be interested. I don't want to take too much of your time, so I think I'll open this up to any questions that I could answer for you. Yes, ma'am.
Are bath salts an issue in the area?
You know what? I haven't seen, I know what you're talking about. There are kids now that are ingesting these bath salts that are causing hallucinogenic effects. Kids are committing suicide behind them under this high. There's some other items out there called Spice, which is a synthetic cannabis that is actually an incense that you can buy in head shops, and they're buying that in like these head shops. We've seen that, and I'm aware of it, but I haven't seen any cases with us with it.
Since it's illegal, it is legal.
Right.
You can buy it anywhere on the internet or wherever.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any avenue that you can go with it?
You know, the only thing you can really do with that is if they're driving, you can get them for operating a vehicle under a drug, or they're unable to operate. But really, other than that, we're really limited on what we can do with that. You know, if they're unable to care for their safety, then you can put them for a general, it's called a 647X section, which is just intoxicating the public, unable to care for their own safety, really low-level misdemeanor. And that is an issue. I know there's some legislation they're trying to capture some of these. The problem with some of these, though, they're synthetic, so they just change one makeup and they're back and running again. So we haven't seen too much of that, though, but it's out there. Yes, sir.
How early do you do presentations in schools as far as, against drugs and stuff?
We do. We're really, DARE is a big program with us, and it always has been. And I mentioned earlier, I taught that for years. And the way we do it in this city, it's very successful. It's usually sergeants and investigators that choose to do this. You go through a school for that, and you take a school. Like I had E.L. Curran, and that was my school for like 6 years. and you get to know the teachers. And what we do at that, there's a curriculum you teach, and I'll tell you, there may not work in every community. Where I came from prior, I don't know if it would work there. It's, you know, in some cities they're overrun. This community, it's very effective. It really does. To this day, I have kids coming up still that know their DARE officer and will see me and say things, and you have a bond with them and their families. We do start as early as 5th grade introducing it. In fact, we were just talking about, I want to introduce at least familiarity with heroin in that group, because it's out there. I mean, these kids have siblings that are probably involved with that. Another question? Yes, Gene?
We talked briefly about it, but if you'd just like to address your the code enforcement, I know a lot of folks in here are familiar with your code enforcement officers, but about, you know, the abandoned property.
Is it in a good way?
In a good way. Your your abandoned property ordinance.
Right.
And what you're doing.
Right, Gene, I think you were part of that abandoned property ordinance we had some years ago. We got your input on it when we started that. And those of you who know Linda Mejia, anybody know Linda? I was able to promote her to supervisor in that unit. So she's now that supervisor, and she's very familiar with that ordinance, Gene. And basically, what they do is that we encourage the owners to register their abandoned homes with us. And there's a fee, just basically a administrative fee that we charge them for. I think it's $75 or $100 per their residence. But what it does is it puts them on a list that we now, we patrol that with code enforcement and officers for squatters, for any vandalism to that property. If it's becoming substandard, we notify them. And what it also provides for us, Gene, is a good contact list for that property of who owns it, who can I get in contact with immediately if something were to happen. From a safety standpoint. So it is a good program, and it's still up and running. We're just working on a new software for it to make it more efficient. But it's an excellent program. If you guys want to call code enforcement with any questions on that, they can answer that for you. Sir, I think you had a question.
Yeah. Is there any particular areas in real estate that there's fraud that your unit is aware of, and how do you initiate some sort of investigation or something with Ron?
Normally we respond to calls for service with fraud. Right now, there was a trend, and we haven't seen it lately, but they're basically the Sovereign Nation, another group that basically is coming in and just taking over abandoned homes and posting papers that basically are saying, hey, we're our own government, you can't come on here, we're this, we're that. And they have an attorney they go to, and it looks, when an officer shows up, I mean, it looks legal. I mean, deed of trust, the whole thing. I'm like, wow, okay, what do we do with this? Well, it's a scam. And so we'll use code enforcement. We breach that, and we basically will investigate it, and we'll get them evicted out of there under criminal sections if we can on that. But we were seeing that for a while. The other one was just closed a big case, but we ended up basically loans, just people working bad loans and doing things like that. And those go straight to one of our investigators. I think it's a big enough scheme. The DA actually now has taken those and has a task force that works those. But we have an investigator, Jeff Ulrich, a corporal detective, that kind of he takes all of our real estate, any complicated one like that, he'll do. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Is there a website we can go to check on the statistics or any incidences or crimes or anything?
Yeah, if you go to the city's website, just pull up Murrieta and then go to departments and hit police. And we have a pretty friendly website on there that can get you to different sites that you might want to get to. Yes, sir.
Traffic-wise,
there's none in Murrieta.
no. I'm just curious about the red light camera issues. Is
Right.
there anything that you can do, or
Right now there's a movement to get them banned, and that's a good question. I'll tell you, when that first came up for us, we're not, it's not like, oh yeah, let's put red light cameras everywhere. We really looked at it, and I think some programs are better than others, but just some information for you folks of those. We really concentrate on those. The ones we put in were for left turn violations, broadside accidents is what we were really trying to address. Some cities really have those. They also capture red light or right turns. Ours actually is set that, I don't know if I should tell you this, but really it's 10 miles. We don't even look at those, it triggers, unless the violation is over 10 miles an hour. So people are, I know the word out there is, oh my gosh, if you just stop and go, they're going to write you a ticket. That's not true, it's false. Basically, you have to be going over 10 miles an hour on a right turn for us to even consider that, which is pretty fast. Yeah, I ain't saying that, but you got to be, watch your speedometer. But I'm saying that obviously an officer watching that, an officer visually seeing that will write you a ticket. I think we're really trying to be sensitive to what these cameras, the purpose of them are for. The other thing with that is, I don't know if you've been following this, the PD isn't making money on this. It's not a money maker. Basically, any money left over from that, the council's already said they're going to donate it to a charity. And it's not like the PD charity, it's a charity, child abuse, something like that. So and even the money I think it was less than $50,000. But don't get me wrong, there are cities that are using this to generate revenue, without a doubt. The other question was LA County. There is a between DAs. LA County, the DA's office didn't interpret this as being able to prosecute these. Riverside County doesn't see it that way. They interpret that section that they can, and they do. So there was one thought, hey, you don't even worry about it if you got one. You don't have to pay it. You got to pay it, Riverside County. You'll pay it at one point. So, but personally, the program we have, I support because it reduces those serious and fatality accidents. It just does. So I would support it the way we have it. Yes, sir.
I see a lot of cell phone violators in Murrieta. What's the enforcement mechanism for that?
We do have that a lot, and it's really, I think, texting more than the cell phones now. That's a generational thing, but I've been behind a couple cars just off duty, and just, that looks like a deuce. It looks like a drunk driver, and it's not. It's just somebody doing this as they're leaving off the road. But really, the only mechanism for that is officers' observations and making those arrests. That's what they do. We do have times that our voters will, in coordination with Highway Patrol and different events, will say, okay, this month is going to target nothing but maybe seatbelts, or it's going to target distraction citations like texting or phone calls, and that's one way of doing it also. To do that. Another question? Yes, sir.
I know, Murrieta, you're essentially an independent office. How much do you interface with Temecula and the other surrounding agencies?
We meet with them regularly. Our patrol sergeants will. One of the things we request of our patrol sergeants when they're new is to right away get that liaisons with Temecula's patrol sergeants, and those are kind of your watch commander, uniform personnel, investigators. We have regular meetings with them because we're all working the same bad guys. They don't stop at city lines. I meet regularly with Andre, their captain over there, a great guy. So I know Andre well. We get together with regional meetings where all of the commanders will meet, and then I meet with Sheriff Sniff with chief meetings. Also, those are quarterly. Our guys are involved in task forces. One more thing I'll tell you we have that's really good for our community is a few years ago we started a gang task force here, a regional gang task force. There's 8 of them in the county. We have one in Murrieta that's responsible for Temecula and Wildomar. And I remember when we started it, I was in charge of investigations at the time, and I really wanted it housed out of our place, and I wanted the task force in general because it really is a force multiplier. It does a great job. We have a Temecula detective on there. We have a highway patrol investigator. We have someone from ICE, someone from probation, from parole, a B&E supervisor, a B&E 2 agents. We have a DA investigator that's assigned to it, and they just get out and take care of business with that. And I remember at the time it was like, well, gosh, you guys, do you really have that big of a gang problem in Murrieta? You need a task force? And I said, no, and that's exactly why we want it now. And that's where we really try to stay ahead of the curve on those issues with that. And so I really, there is a big push right now with B&E. I don't know if you guys have been following this with the state budget to eliminate 200 of their 400 narcotic enforcement officers. That's the longest standing narcotic enforcement organization in the state of California. And they're looking at cutting them in half If that happens, it will impact our task forces. We are going to try to keep ours open no matter what, but that's an issue. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. It's Department of Justice, Bureau of Narcotic Enforcement, and that's the division under the state Department of Justice that works narcotics, and mainly task forces and big drug seizures and cases. Yes.
I have a question only because I was driving down the freeway this weekend and I saw this wonderful display of very nicely done graffiti, but very, very large on one surrounding wall. That brought to mind that I thought in Murrieta that we did have a graffiti task force that whose job was to go out and get rid of that stuff as quick as possible. And I think you can see some of the walls are the favorite walls because
right.
They have multiple places where that's already been addressed. So that was my question: is are they still doing that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
If it was it in Murrieta, was it off the freeway?
It was off the freeway on the east side as I was heading to Temecula.
Yeah, I don't think it's
Murrieta border or Temecula.
I don't. If it's in Murrieta, we are very diligent about getting out there, photographing it, and getting off the walls. We really believe in that whole broken window philosophy, and we're on it. We also, the reason we photograph it is that gang task force I talked about actually puts some cases together and puts them in jail over it. I mean, it's not just your, not just kicking doors for guns and all that. That's another thing we go after big, and then those taggers will do that. But yeah, no, we're still on it. If you see it, Murrieta, call us and let us know. If you see it before us, we'll get on it. Any other questions? Okay, you know what? I just wanted to thank you guys again for having me. And if I can be of any help, I'm on the website there, and feel free to contact me. Thank you very much.
He really is too. Right on the front page of the City of Murrieta's website, it has his picture and his direct email address. And if you just click that little button, you can send him an email and he'll respond to you.
I get a lot of them.
That you do. That's another one of the nice things about having local law enforcement. But he didn't mention it specifically, but Murrieta is the only city in our area that has its own police force. Everybody else contracts with Riverside County. Murrieta has its own police force. That was a decision they made back when the city first started, and it was controversial at the time. There's still rumblings and grumblings occasionally. You could probably contract it out and save some money or what have you. But they have been diligent over the years and have done an excellent job. And I know, regarding Mario's question about graffiti, one of the things, when I was active on the street selling real estate, you'd get a buyer come over from Orange County or LA County or someplace, and you come out and you drive around, you see 2 or 3 homes, and all of a sudden you can kind of see this look on their face, and all of a sudden they realize you've driven around half the city and say, you don't have graffiti out here. And it's really true, and they still do an excellent job, and yes, they're very, very diligent at that. And of course, if you see something, call them, because they will respond. The same way with code enforcement. Linda Mahee has been around a long time. She actually, when they started the abandoned property ordinance, she actually took some real estate courses, and we spent a lot of time together so she could understand our processes and how you as REO agents acquire the properties and when you become responsible for maintenance of that. And so unlike some of the cities, Chula Vista and some of the cities, again, that are using the abandoned property ordinance as revenue generators, the city of Murrieta and subsequent to that Temecula, Lake Elsinore, Canyon Lake, and so forth, who implemented abandoned property ordinances, all did it on a little different model with input from us as realtors. And so we're not ending up like Chula Vista, where sometimes they generate fines of, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 against an abandoned property, and it's just a revenue generator for the city, and it doesn't really help out anybody at all. So Murrieta has really done a lot of things right. They deserve to be commended, and I'm very encouraged with the new chief. Like I said, our previous chiefs have all been great guys. Mike's been here 20 years. He understands the city. He knows a lot of the residents personally. It's just that kind of personal touch that you don't get with a lot of other big city police forces, which we are kind of a big city now. So anyway, really glad he came in today. A couple of other things. I did want to address, you had a question on fraud. Our association has a fraud task force, and if you run across things out there that look a little fishy in a transaction, or you see something that, maybe not quite right, please bring it to our attention. We have an email box, fraud@srcar.org, and you can register information on there. You can send us, attachments or what have you, and we follow up on it. We've already had 4 meetings with our new district attorney in the last 6 months. That's 3 meetings more than we had with our previous district attorney in the past 6 years. So he is very good. He is also, in addition to Chief Baray, the district attorney is also going to be assigning a liaison to our fraud task force, because they are very, very concerned about it. And fraud keeps changing. It's no longer the old Stonewood fraud, of the mortgage fraud situation, but it keeps changing around. And now we have rampant short sale fraud. We've had problems with squatters. We have problems with people taking over properties with fraudulent trust deeds and claiming that they own the property. And a lot of that is really above what the local police force can do. They're not really trained to deal with that. They don't have the resources to deal with that. But again, if you bring that to the attention of our local fraud task force, we can assign that out, either work with the local folks. Sometimes some things we can put a stop to just by getting our attorney involved. Some things will go to the district attorney or the Department of Real Estate or the Attorney General, who has also established a real estate fraud strike force, and they've been very effective. They just shut down a big ring headquartered here out of California about 2 weeks ago that involved 17 states across the country. If you go to Gadblog, I wrote about it a couple weeks ago, but it involved 3 brokers, attorneys actually, out of Orange County, and it was just a massive short sale fraud, and involved, they don't know how many millions of dollars yet, because 17 states across the country these people were doing it. It was just a rampant issue. So something like that needs to be escalated to a little bit higher level than the Murrieta PD can handle. So once again, fraud at SRCAR if you run across that. The last thing, well, 2 last things actually that I wanted to talk about. I meant to mention earlier at the state level, legislatively, we just had another bill the governor signed yesterday, AB 1711. That's the 4th CAR bill that we've had passed and signed by the governor this year. That's a great record, by the way. That's very unusual. 3 of the bills that we got passed and signed this year, we've passed in 2 previous sessions, but Governor Schwarzenegger vetoed them. This year, Governor Brown signed them. The first one, of course, which you're probably all aware of, was the anti-deficiency bill, which has to do with holders of second lien holders. If they agree to a short sale, they also agree that they're not going to go back after your clients for a deficiency judgment. That was a biggie. We've been working on that for 3 years. The second one, the one he just signed yesterday, is the HOA. I know a lot of you have worked with HOAs, and we got a bill passed about 5-6 years ago that said if you go to an HOA, they were jacking up their fees, trying to make a little bit of money off you when you transfer homeowners' documents at the end of the transaction. And so we got a bill passed that said you can't charge any more than what it actually costs you to provide that service. Well, what the HOAs did is they started contracting that out to third parties. And so the third parties were not subject to that bill. They could charge anything they want. And so if you were up in Menifee, for example, instead of charging $125 or $150 to transfer HOA docs, all of a sudden if you've got 2 or 3 HOAs involved, you could be looking at bills of $1,100, $1,200 to get those HOA docs transferred. Well, this bill says, no, you can't do that. Even if you contract out to a third party, they are subject to the same regulations as you can only charge what the actual costs are. So your sellers, or you, if you happen to pick those things up, should see a reduction in fee. What I didn't notice on the bill when I read it this morning is whether it's an urgency bill, meaning it goes into effect immediately, or if it goes into effect the end of the year. But one way or another, there will be some relief on that. The third bill that we got passed, again, this is the 3rd time we've gotten it passed. The first time the governor has actually signed it. Is the bill dealing with HOA's right to rent, or CID right to rent. If you bought a condominium in a complex, and at the time you bought it, it said you could rent that property out, it was getting to the point where HOAs were changing the rules in the middle of the game and saying, oh, you can't rent that out anymore. Well, if it's a onesie-twosie deal, maybe it's not that big a deal, but we have people that own, maybe 20, 30, 40 units in a specific complex. And all of a sudden the HOA would change the rules and says you no longer use these as rental units. Well, given the economy the way it is, you can't sell the darn things. You can't rent them out anymore. So what do you got? You got 30 or 40 properties going into foreclosure, and it's really an infringement on private property rights. So for 2 years we've been trying to get this passed that says you can't change the rules in the middle of the game on people, and what the bill now says is that if you buy that unit and it says you can rent it, you can continue to rent it as long as you own it. When you sell the property, the new rules apply to the new owner, which is only fair. If they buy it, they can no longer use it as a rental. But at least your property rights and your ownership rights are protected. So that was also passed and signed by the governor. So we've had a pretty good year so far. We've still got 3 that are live and 1 that's in a pending mode. So we feel pretty good about that. I did want to mention coming up, DJ and her legislative committee, right over here. Next week, is this next week? September 26th is right here in this wonderful room, breakfast with our city managers. If you attended last year, it was a great event. We had a sold-out crowd. I think it was the first event that we actually held in our new facility after we opened last year. So breakfast with our city managers. We're going to be having Sean Nelson from Temecula, Rick Dudley, Murrieta, Frank Oviedo from Wildomar, Bill Rawlings from Menifee, and we're probably also going to have Bob Brady from Lake Elsinore if he's able to join us. We're also going to be joined by Aaron Adams, who's the Assistant City Manager and Economic Development guy from Temecula, and Bruce Coleman, who's the Economic Development guy from Murrieta. So it'll be a very interesting morning to come out and hear these folks. They'll do a brief presentation. They'll talk about what's going on in their cities, and then there'll be an opportunity for question and answer, and of course breakfast will be served. And all this is to benefit the Realtor Action Fund, so we greatly appreciate that. So, anything else, Howie? I'll turn it back over to you. You can talk for a while. How's that? Thank you all for coming out this morning. Hope you enjoyed the Chief.